Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. We're now going to be diving into the Pacers win over the Milwaukee Bucks, where they took Game 2 and find themselves headed back home with a split series after what looked like a very concerning Game 1, but they come out in this one, win 125-108. The Bucks were trying to hang in there for a lot of it, but again, in that second half, the Pacers were just able to pull away thanks to a masterful Pascal Siakam game, who has clearly been one of the most sort of underrated pieces in this Pacers offense in terms of the expectations for their postseason. This is a very young Indiana Pacers team. And then you remember the fact that Pascal Siakam was one of the best players from the Raptors 2019 team, and Raptors haven't necessarily been playoff relevant for a couple years now, but he has been such a mismatch in this series early on. He scored 35 points, I believe it was, in Game 1. Last night, 37 and 11 with 6 assists as well. The Bucks just have no answers for him defensively, and it's the thing, is obviously Giannis is, it goes without saying really that Giannis is incredibly important for the Bucks to be able to win these types of playoff games. But when you look at what the Bucks are doing to try and guard Pascal, they're putting Brook Lopez on him, who, of course, if you have watched Milwaukee Bucks basketball over the past handful of years, Lopez has been one of the elite rim protectors in the league because of some of the systems that Budenholzer ran when he was the head coach of the team, and playing that drop defense, having more aggressive point of attack defenders. And now it's this situation where he is currently matched up against Pascal Siakam, who is sort of, we've seen this for a handful of guys throughout the regular season, but Pascal is one of those athletic, lengthy players with good touch around the rim that Lopez is trying to sag off of him, and Siakam is just ramping himself up with momentum, getting a full head of steam, and going right into the chest of Lopez and finishing over him. We also saw Siakam hit 3 3-pointers, all of them catch and shoot because Lopez is trying to sag off of him, help out in the defense more, or in the paint more, because the Pacers are such a good team at scoring in the paint that he's trying to be involved there and also guard Siakam. The idea is, okay, we can leave Siakam open, but Siakam is shooting something along the lines of 40% on catch and shoot looks this season. Has been a very dramatic turnaround from his early years in Toronto. He's developed, not that he has, the Luka Doncic off the dribble 3-point range, but he is able to knock down shots if you leave him open. And then Lopez started pressing him up a little bit more, and I thought that there were a couple instances of some really impressive, driving in the stop and pops in the paint. Got a couple of those to bounce in. He was looking for mismatches, and anytime he had, whether it was Pat Connaughton or Damian Lillard, he was just doing a tremendous job of putting himself in position, and it plays into the fact that the Pacers are such a high-paced team that he is moving out in transition. Typically, the first line of defense in a lot of these transition opportunities can be the guards, and I think that Tyrese Halliburton is finding him in spots where, as much as, so I guess shifting off of Siakam here, who I could probably go on about for another 5 minutes because I think he's been so incredible early on, but sort of brings me into the Halliburton conversation, where he was better last night than he was in Game 1, finished with 12 points, 12 assists as well. It feels so different than it did early on in the year, and I feel like a large part of that has to be if once the Pacers are eliminated, we hear that Halliburton was dealing with some sort of serious injury that he hasn't fully recovered from. I believe it was his groin when he first went out during the regular season. He just has not been the same, averaging just 17 points per game after the All-Star break. And again, he's still fine, but and felt like at times, especially when it got into those final minutes, it was Halliburton. He's going to either create a shot for himself. His 3-point shooting was off the charts back in the fall, or he was going to make a great pass to find an open player. And he still does, I think his bread and butter or his backbone, whichever, take your pick. But I think he came up as a little bit more of a traditional point guard. Now, the shot has always been a thing that has been part of his arsenal, and I still think that it is. He went 3 of 7 last night, so it's not like he was lights out. It's not like he was bad either, but I think that he's just not necessarily the level of creator that we thought that he was going to make that jump of in this season, and it's still fine because he's still a very solid player. The Pacers are a team right now that are, especially when you see the fact that Siakam is having this type of an impact in year one, but only playing the second half of the season with the Pacers, this could be a real threat in the Eastern Conference in years to come. And I still give them a good chance. I picked them over the Bucks headed into the series. It feels like if Giannis isn't going to be back, that, again, I don't know how they don't have the personnel, and that's been the conversation around the Bucks all year, is defensively, they just don't have the personnel to actually hold up on that defensive side of the ball. Now, they're starting Pat Bev in a bunch of these games now, and trying to add a little bit more defensive juice to their starting lineup, having Malik Beasley come off the bench, who last night only played 10 minutes, which I feel like tells you how they sort of feel about him, considering the fact that he was one of the best three-point shooters during the regular season, at least during the first half of the year, and now they just don't really trust him to be matched up against this Pacers team that is trying to run you up and down the court. And I don't know. I think there are adjustments definitely to be made for Milwaukee here. I want to touch on Damian Lillard, who, I mean, I had questions a little bit whether or not he had the legs under him still to single-handedly carry a team through a playoff series. And to some degree, I think that single-handedly, with how tough the NBA is now in the year 2024, like those LeBron years where he was running through the Eastern Conference, and some years he had no help. I'm curious whether or not we're ever really going to have that anymore, because it just feels like the level of talent across the league is so much better. But, I mean, Lillard was doing everything that he could in the first half, especially. Once again, we saw in Game 1, he scored 35 points in the first half and put it on the Pacers, ended up getting them into a position where they were just sort of rolling. The Pacers did not look ready, and Lillard was really feeling himself. In this game, once again, we saw Lillard come out really hot in the first half. He scored 26 points. Brook Lopez was also hitting at a pretty decent rate for them as well. That provided some first half offense, but again, when the Pacers adjusted at halftime and put that extra pressure on Lillard, and this is a situation where if the Pacers are gonna sort of double down on the Lillard ball handling minutes, maybe you do try and have a little bit more reliable shooters in the game like Malik Beasley. AJ Green actually played more minutes than Beasley in this game with 15 minutes played, only shot 1 3-pointer, and that's typically what he's in the game for. But, you know, it's one of those things where I don't know how much schematically Doc Rivers can even do in a situation like this, but if they're going to find a way to win this series, outside of Giannis coming back and putting on his Superman cape and, you know, taking the Bucks to a different level, I find a really hard time talking myself into the argument of how the Bucks are going to be able to win this series. Again, it felt like Game 1 sort of caught the Pacers off guard. This young team that is built off of their offense didn't really have the defensive strategy. They weren't playing great defensively headed into the playoffs anyways, and I know that the Bucks weren't fully trying to take advantage of the paint, but it seemed like they could get going there whenever they wanted to. felt like it was a different story in this game. I thought that Miles Turner also was a lot better in game 2 than he was on game 1, really on both sides of the ball. The Bucks this game, it felt like, had no chance of really getting to the paint consistently, and that's where Giannis just makes such a big difference, because he adds a physical wing on the other end that can match up against Siakam better. He adds a mismatch on the offensive end where he's just this force that requires so much extra attention, especially when he's going downhill and moving towards the paint, which can open up shooters more on the perimeter for the Bucks. But either way, again, I feel like they are definitely up against the odds, and that was the case as soon as Giannis went down with his injury. And it is also one of those things where you definitely want to see Giannis come out and help lead the Bucks to a run here, but you also, with that type of a calf injury, again, overstated at this point almost, but in comparison to the 2019 combination of Kevin Durant's calf injury and then tearing his Achilles, you just want to avoid that as much as possible. And I feel like, I don't know, the Bucks are definitely up against it right now. I'm not sure what they can do with the way that their roster is currently constructed without Giannis. I feel like they're going to need the Pacers to sort of beat themselves more than anything that the team themselves can do. Now, again, you have Damian Lillard, who has the reputation, again, 35 and 34 points in the first 2 games, though, and it's not like they really have other players that I think are going to step up in a big way. I don't know, if you're just sort of throwing the kitchen sink out there, I like Andre Jackson more than I feel like Doc Rivers does. Andre Jackson just hasn't really gotten much minutes for the Bucks at all during the Doc Rivers tenure of the Milwaukee Bucks season, but with the athleticism, the youth, I feel like he is somebody who can sort of match that energy of the Pacers. But, you know, outside of that, really, I'm not sure what else they can do here. They're an older team, and it just seems like the Pacers they found their confidence in last game. They're going back to Indiana. I feel like that crowd there in Indy is going to be, you know, sneakily electric. I feel like that's another city location that, when the team is actually good, I feel like the fans really, really care about it. And I think that Indiana, I mean, Tyrese Halliburton had some words about the Bucks crowd. He said that they had regular season games, which was more of a home court advantage than what the Bucks had during those first 2 games. There was also a situation, I guess somebody called Halliburton's brother a racial slur, so I don't know if that was just sort of an extra dig that he was trying to throw at Milwaukee, just as sort of a I'm gonna avoid the profanity here, but sort of just throw one last shot at the Bucks fans on his way out of Milwaukee. But we'll see. Let me know what you think about this series moving forward. But now we're going to be taking our final break of the show. And when we come back on the other side, we're going to be moving off of some basketball and just reacting to some of the breaking news from this afternoon about the Lions signing wide receiver Amon-Ra St. Brown to a mega contract extension. So we will be touching on that when we come back on the other side of the break. Stick with us. We will be right back.